Marcus Henderson needed 847 by Friday or he'd lose his flat. 73 years old, pension of $623 monthly, rent $847. The math didn't work and never had. So Marcus played guitar in Leicester Square Tube station every day, 12 hours, trying to make the difference. His guitar had one string because he'd spent the string replacement money on food. His hands barely worked because arthritis had turned his fingers into claws. But Marcus played Brown Sugar because it was the song commuters recognized, the song that made them stop and drop coins. When Keith Richards came down those escalator stairs and heard his own song being massacred by a one-string guitar played by shaking arthritic hands, his first instinct was annoyance. His second instinct, when he actually looked at Marcus and saw the determination in a 73-year-old face refusing to give up, was awe. What Keith did about the one string, the arthritis, and the 847 Marcus needed became the reason Marcus's landlord called him a month later asking, "Why is Keith Richards paying your rent?" It was Tuesday afternoon in October 1988, and Leicester Square Tube station was packed with the usual chaos of tourists, commuters, and street performers competing for attention and money. Marcus Henderson sat in his regular spot near the bottom of the escalators, back against the tiled wall, his ancient acoustic guitar across his lap. He'd been there since 6 that morning, and it was now 2 in the afternoon, 8 hours. His hands were screaming with pain, his back ached from sitting on concrete, and he'd made 34 hours. He needed 224 more by Friday, 4 days. The landlord had been clear, 847 total or eviction proceedings start. Marcus's monthly pension was $623. Every month, the same impossible mathematics. Every month, 12-hour days in the tube station trying to make up the difference. Marcus's guitar told the story of those impossible mathematics. It was a 1960s acoustic that had once been beautiful, now held together with hope and desperation. The finish was worn through to bare wood in places. The tuning pegs were loose. The bridge was cracked, and most tellingly, it had only one string. The high E string, the thinnest, highest-pitched string, the only one that hadn't snapped. The other 5 had broken over the past 6 months, one by one, each a small tragedy Marcus couldn't afford to fix. New strings cost $8 for a set, £8. That meant choosing between guitar strings and eating. Marcus had chosen eating. Then he'd spent 6 months learning to play entire songs on one string. It was harder than anyone who hadn't tried could imagine. You couldn't play chords. You couldn't play multiple notes simultaneously. You could only play melody, one note at a time, and hope it was recognizable enough that people understood what song you were attempting. Marcus had gotten good at it. He'd adapted Brown Sugar to work on one string, creating a version that was technically a melody, but somehow suggested the rhythm and feel of the original. It wasn't good. Marcus knew it wasn't good. But it was recognizable, and recognition was what made commuters stop and drop coins. His hands were the other problem. Arthritis had been creeping into Marcus's fingers for a decade, but in the past year it had accelerated dramatically. His knuckles were swollen, his fingers permanently curved like claws. Straightening them required active effort and caused sharp pain. Playing guitar was agony. Every note hurt. Every movement of his twisted fingers across the fretboard sent jolts of pain up his arms. But Marcus played anyway, because the alternative was homelessness, and at 73, homeless meant dead. He was midway through his one-string version of Brown Sugar when he noticed a man standing at the bottom of the escalator, not moving. Usually people flowed past Marcus like water around a rock, glancing, sometimes stopping, mostly ignoring. But this man had stopped completely, blocking the escalator exit, forcing other passengers to step around him. The man was in his mid-40s, wearing an expensive-looking black suit that was slightly rumpled, carrying a leather briefcase with messy dark hair that suggested he'd dressed well but hadn't bothered with grooming. He was staring at Marcus with an expression that looked like annoyance. Marcus kept playing. He was used to annoyed looks. People who thought street musicians were beggars. People who thought his one-string version of songs was insulting to the originals. Marcus didn't care about their opinions. He cared about the coins they might drop. But this man didn't drop a coin. He just stood there, staring, as Marcus played through the verse. Then the man's expression changed. The annoyance faded, replaced by something that looked like confusion, then something that looked like recognition, then something that looked like awe. The man walked over. Marcus prepared for the usual comments. That's not how that song goes, or you're missing 5 strings, or maybe you should give up. He'd heard them all. Instead, the man said, "How the hell are you doing that?" Marcus looked up at the man properly for the first time and felt his stomach drop. He knew that face. Everyone in Britain knew that face. Keith Richards, the Keith Richards, standing in Leicester Square Tube station, expensive suit and briefcase, staring at Marcus like he'd just witnessed something impossible. "Doing what?" Marcus asked, his voice rough from not speaking much all day. "Playing Brown Sugar on 1 string. That shouldn't be possible. That song requires chords, requires multiple notes, but I just heard you play the entire verse and it was recognizable." "How?" Marcus looked down at his guitar, at his one surviving string, at his arthritic hands that had spent 6 months figuring out the impossible. Didn't have a choice. Other strings broke. Can't afford to replace them. Needed to keep playing. So I figured it out, Nentir. Wise. Keith was quiet for a moment, looking at Marcus's hands, really looking. Marcus saw the exact moment Keith noticed the arthritis, the swollen knuckles, the curved fingers, the way Marcus's hands shook even when he wasn't playing. "Your hands," Keith said quietly. "That's arthritis?" "Yeah. Getting worse every year. Hurts like hell to play. But I need the money, so I play." "How much do you make in a day doing this?" Marcus hesitated, then figured honesty couldn't hurt. "Good day, maybe $40. Bad day, $20. Today I've made 34 in 8 hours, or not net." Keith looked at the small pile of coins in Marcus's open guitar case, looked at the 1-string guitar, looked at Marcus's twisted hands, looked at Marcus's face, 73 years old, weathered, tired, but determined. "Why do you need the money?" "If you don't mind me asking." "Rent. My pension is $623 a month. My rent is $847. Every month I'm $224 short. So I play here 12 hours a day trying to make up the difference. It's where yerbo down win." Marcus paused. "This month I need $224 or more by Friday, or my landlord starts eviction." Keith was very quiet. Around them, the tube station flowed, hundreds of people going about their lives, completely unaware that a rock legend was standing in their midst talking to a street musician. Finally, Keith did something that surprised Marcus. He sat down. Right there on the dirty tube station floor, expensive suit and all, sitting cross-legged next to Marcus like they were old friends. "Can I see the guitar?" Marcus handed it over carefully. Keith examined it with the eye of someone who'd been playing guitar for 40 years. He plucked the single string, listened to the tone, checked the neck alignment, looked at the broken bridge, the worn frets, the missing strings. "This guitar is dying," Keith said. "But you're keeping it alive through sheer force of will." He handed it back. Play Brown Sugar again. I want to watch your hands." Marcus played. He was self-conscious now, aware that he was playing Keith Richards' song in front of Keith Richards, aware that his 1-string version was a pale shadow of the original. But he played it the way he'd learned, 1 note at a time, his arthritic fingers moving across the single string, creating a melody that suggested the song without truly being it. Keith watched Marcus's hands the entire time, watched how the twisted fingers had to work twice as hard to press the string, watched how Marcus's hands shook between notes, watched how every movement caused visible pain. When Marcus finished, Keith was shaking his head, not in disappointment, but in disbelief. "That's incredible. You've basically reinvented the song for a single string. You've adapted it to work with what you have instead of giving up because you don't have what you need." He paused, genuinely impressed. Most musicians, if they lost 5 strings, would stop playing until they could replace them. They'd see it as impossible. But you saw it as a problem to solve. You spent 6 months figuring out how to make 1 string do the work of 6. That's not just playing music. That's understanding music at a level most professional musicians never reach. You've stripped the song down to its absolute essence and rebuilt it with the only tool you had left. Keith looked at Marcus with new respect. "How long did it take you to figure that out?" 6 months. First string broke in April. Last one broke in September. Spent all that time learning to play songs people would recognize on whatever strings I had left. By the time I was down to 1, I'd gotten pretty good at adaptation. "And you do this 12 hours a day? With hands that hurt that much?" "Don't have a choice. It's this or lose my home." Keith reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. Marcus had seen this before. People pulling out wallets to drop a pound or two. But Keith didn't pull out coins. He pulled out a thick stack of 50-pound notes, started counting them. Put 10 notes, 500 in Marcus's guitar case. Marcus stared at the money. I can't. That's too much. It's not enough, Keith interrupted. That covers this month's shortfall and next month's. But that's not solving the problem. That's just delaying it. Keith put his wallet away and looked at Marcus seriously. Here's what's going to happen. Give me your landlord's name and address. Why? Because I'm going to call him and set up a standing payment to cover the difference between your pension and your rent every month, so you don't have to sit on this floor destroying your hands anymore. Marcus couldn't speak. He tried, but no words came out. Keith continued, and tomorrow you and I are going to a music shop. We're getting you a proper guitar with 6 strings, and then we're going to a specialist I know who deals with arthritis in musicians. There are treatments, medications, therapy, sometimes minor surgery that can help. You shouldn't have to be in constant pain. I can't afford... You're not paying. I am. Keith's voice was firm but kind. Marcus, I've spent 50 years playing guitar. I've played on the best stages in the world, with the best equipment money can buy, with hands that work properly. And I've never had to show a fraction of the determination you show every single day. You've earned help. You're going to accept it. Tears were running down Marcus's face now. He wasn't sure when he'd started crying, but he couldn't stop. Keith reached over and put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. How long have you been playing guitar? 56 years. Started when I was 17. Played in bands when I was young, before arthritis, before everything. Music's all I know, all I've got. Then you shouldn't have to choose between music and survival. Music should be what makes survival worth it. Keith stood up, brushed off his expensive suit pants. I've got to get to a meeting I'm now very late for. But I'm coming back tomorrow at 2 p.m. We're going guitar shopping. Deal? Marcus nodded, still unable to speak. Keith picked up his briefcase, then paused. One more thing. That 1-string version of Brown Sugar you created? That's genius. When you get your new guitar and you've got all 6 strings again, don't forget that version. That's something special. That's the sound of refusing to quit. People need to hear that. The next day, Keith returned at exactly 2 p.m. He brought Marcus to a music shop in Soho, where they spent 2 hours finding the perfect guitar. Not the most expensive, but the one that felt right in Marcus's twisted hands. Keith bought it without blinking, along with extra sets of strings, a proper case, and a small battery-powered amplifier for the tube station. Then they went to Keith's arthritis specialist. The doctor examined Marcus's hands and prescribed a treatment plan, new medications, physical therapy 3 times weekly, and minor surgery to reduce knuckle swelling. Keith paid for everything up front. A week later, Marcus's landlord called, his voice confused and slightly suspicious. Mr. Henderson, I received a very strange call from someone claiming to be Keith Richards, saying he's set up a standing monthly payment to cover your rent shortfall every month going forward indefinitely. Is this real, or is someone having me on? It's real, Marcus said, still hardly believing it himself. 3 months later, Marcus's hands hurt less than they had in years. The medications and therapy were working. He played his new 6-string guitar in Leicester Square Station, not because he needed to for survival, but because he wanted to. Because music made life worth living, not just kept him alive. And he still played his 1-string version of Brown Sugar, because Keith was right. It was the sound of refusing to quit, and people needed to hear that. Marcus kept his old 1-string guitar hanging on his wall at home. A reminder that sometimes your limitations force you to create something new. Sometimes what you lose teaches you what you're really capable of. If this powerful story about Marcus Henderson, Keith Richards, and the profound difference between merely surviving and actually living moved you deeply, remember that the greatest music isn't always played on the best instruments. Sometimes it's played on 1 string by hands that refuse to stop creating beauty.